Today we're talking about color, but before we do, I wanted to point out that on this page you'll find a donate button. 2020 has been a tough year, of course, kind of an understatement, but with Christmas coming, we wanted to bring our community together to help as much as we can. So for the rest of the month, every episode is going to have a place where you can donate. Again, since it is the Christmas season, the first one is Toys for Tots. It's been a year that has made hope a difficult thing to come by. And I know as a parent myself, a child getting a gift does spark a ton of joy and hope. Enabling families that have a difficult time to still provide that joy for their kids, I think will go a really long way. And for me, that's what Christmas is all about. So if you can, consider giving just $1. Because if everybody who watched this video just gave $1, as a community, we would help thousands and thousands of families. We're gonna be donating weekly, and I hope you join us. So color, obviously, is how we perceive light waves that enter our eyeballs. Like music, color can evoke emotion or memories, and we are surrounded by color, of course, in our regular natural lives, but I mean more in a branded sense, like yellow being IMDb or McDonald's, red you have Target and Coca-Cola, Netflix, blue you have Vimeo, Twitter, Facebook, HP, and so on. And I think all of these things, including the natural ones, do seep in. I do think it's why when I think red on yellow, I immediately think Kill Bill. And for me, color is like music. It's incredibly personal and subjective, and the way that I like to use it is what that specific thing means to me. I think some things are pretty universal, like saturated versus desaturated. For me, saturated can feel more inviting, happy, pleasing, while desaturated will lean toward more depressing and grim, so on. With that, the first thing I think of is how vibrant and colorful a bright summer day feels, vacations and such, while dark and gloomy rainy days feel less saturated. Maybe it's things like that that lean us to feel one way or another about a specific color and the saturation of it. I mean, it's probably why when you have a dystopian sci-fi film, they're pretty desaturated, but when you have a rom-com, they are very saturated and bright. So what I wanted to do today is not to try to teach you something, but to explore something together. It's a thing that I think we're going to be doing more going forward. This stuff is what we usually do privately to shape our thinking about how we create and tell stories. So I figured why not start doing it openly with all of you. So I asked Josh to go and shoot a bunch of colors on a face, then some combinations in different ways so that I could study through these to see how they make me feel. Not coming from a scientific standpoint or trying really to intellectualize it, but instead just approach it from a subjective, emotional place, like music. So I have a monitor right here just beyond the camera, and I'm gonna be going through them, seeing each of them for the first time and just how they interact with me on an emotional level. Because again, I think those are the things that continue to instruct me as a filmmaker and how I want to tell my stories. So the first one we have here is just pure red, and I actually really love the way red looks on the face. Again, I can't intellectualize it. I don't know why, but there's something about this tone on the face that really clicks with me. But this isn't a happy look to me at all. This isn't something that I'm going to use when it's a joyful moment. This is something that for me, the character's moving into something dangerous. And obviously when you think about red right away, you think about danger because alarms are red, you know, you think about anger for obvious reasons. So all of this does lend to that, this hellish look on her face, and that maybe is where the character is leaning towards, which immediately just makes me start to think of different ways that we could pose our scene. Maybe our character is on the side of the street and there is a red sign that they stop by, and in that moment they, you know, look in that direction and we get a wash of red on their face. I really think it's things like that that do add those subconscious ideas to your story, to your character, to push it all forward in a very visual and emotional way. And that to me is cinematic. That's where it really becomes cinematic, and you really start telling a more immersive story, a more thoughtful story. Because even if your audience doesn't clue in on that, I think even by you thinking that way, like me thinking that way right now, just by seeing this, being inspired by this, you're thinking more deeply in those ways. You start thinking more deeply into your character's dilemma, into their thought processes. So I think the more deeply you think about every moment like that, the more invested you will be in your story and your audience will be in your story. This immediately makes me just think of Blade Runner. I definitely think sci-fi with this sort of pinkish, purplish sort of hue. I do like it. I'm not as drawn to it as the red, and this feels a little more neutral to me. This definitely feels stylistic, noirish in a way, although I use the term noir in a very broad sense, not a very specific noir sense. Like Blade Runner to me is like a sci-fi noir. But it definitely feels a little bit like that. This is really interesting in a lot of ways. You would see this sort of tone maybe in like a Black Mirror sort of piece. It feels more futuristic, at least to me. And then this blue, I kind of hate this on the face, but I kind of like it too. So this is definitely a bit more harsh. Maybe if it was stopped down just a touch, it wouldn't feel quite as harsh. And off the bat, I'm not getting any major use cases like I did with red. This isn't really inspiring me to one specific way. But what I think is interesting about this is probably some of you are already disagreeing with me, that this probably did click something with you. And that's what I mean by like color is musical. It is subjective and it is going to spark different emotions for different people. This just looks entirely desaturated. It does almost look black and white, and I actually really like it. There is a bit of a despair to it. I immediately think like vampires, obviously, but there's like a gloominess to this that I think is really interesting. If you desaturate your characters, not through the grade, but through light, the light that they move through, they step out in more of a normal tone and into something like this where it's desaturated, would say a lot about either their mood change, what just happened to them, what was just said to them, or what they're moving into. If they know they're moving into some kind of conflict they desperately don't want to have, that's going to affect them in that way. Pulling in a light such as this, I think would be really effective. Then we have another green, but this is like, I like it when it's not hard, like primary color. I'm a big fan of secondary colors, more like cyans and things like that. Except red, I do like hard red. And this is a type of color that I really love using as a background. It adds a really nice style. Facing directly on our actor, it does give another sickly look like the other color. It's kind of doing the same thing for me, but this has a bit more of a menacing feel than the last one did, that very pale look of the last one. This one does feel a little more dangerous. I don't know why, but it does. So there's the general colors, and I wanted to know if there was a wash of that color on the face, how would that make us feel before moving into the other section where Josh actually has a background color as well as a color on the actor that we will compare to. But before we get to that, I did want to pause a second to point out how Josh shot these. To switch between all the different colors, we did need an RGB light, of course, so we reached for our Nanlite Pavo tubes. We also partnered with Nanlite for this episode, and you can find all the links below for any of that. But we've also been talking about these lights pretty much all year, and that is because this year was the first time that I got my hands on them, and I really love the hell out of these. They are built incredibly well, they feel sturdy and durable, great button layout, and I'm a big fan of tube lights like these. The shape gives a look that I love, and of course, like I said, they are RGB, or well, RGB WW to be specific, WW standing for warm white. But for this, we use both the 4-foot tubes and the 2-foot tubes, which I'm also using in this setup right here, and there's 1-foot tube as well, and this one has all the same functionality. It's super bright, and it's just $99. I've walked around with this thing in my back pocket while shooting just to have in case I needed to throw it somewhere for something specific. But they all have a color temp range of 2700 through 6500 Kelvin, CRI of 98, and a great battery life. Seems like a little over 2 hours at 100% brightness. But of course, you can plug in as well for continuous shooting, so I don't have to worry that it's going to shut off on me and stop our shooting while I have to recharge the thing. You can also connect multiple tubes together with the sync cord and program different special effects like you get with a lot of these types of lights. And if we jump to HSI, hue, saturation, intensity, we can shift in between those three functions to dial in the look that we're after, or cycle through the colors like we're doing here to see the different looks. What I like about this shape of light is that it has a nice size to give a very pleasing and soft light, but it's also incredibly thin, so I can easily hide it in places or spin it to the side for a completely different look, or use it as a lightsaber like we showed in this episode here. It's also great for Hollywooding if you need a bit of a punch during a walk and talk, which Hollywooding is just holding the light instead of putting it on a stand. And you could slap on this grid to focus in the light a bit more, which is what we're doing here with our 2-footer to keep the light off the wall behind me. And as we have showed in previous episodes, is a great light to have for all kinds of VFX work. It's funny how versatile this light is. When I first got it, I thought it would be something I would only use in specific ways, but it really has become, as I've said in plenty of episodes before this, a light that we reach for the most. So again, definitely check the links in the notes below. If you're looking for a light like this is definitely the one I would personally recommend. But let's move right back into these shots, into the shots where we're also putting a color on the background as well. And for this one, it's just a pure wash of red. So far, this is one of my favorites. I don't know what it is about red, but I just love it. And I wouldn't, if you would have asked me, I wouldn't have thought I would have loved a pure wash of red, but I really dig this. I feel like this is something that I would go to for a very stylistic moment. I could see something like this in a club scene. but also in ads or a music video. This is something that I think would work extremely well. It's obviously all of this is going to be extremely stylized, but again, it's kind of giving me a lot of the same vibes that I talked about with the red before, just a little more heightened. And here there's sort of a pinkish on the red, and I don't like this. This is not pleasing to me at all. And I know I'm not saying anything like super educational, but like I said before, that's not what this is all about. This is just about how it makes us feel. I love this red on blue. She almost feels cut out, like she's on a green screen or something. I would love to cut out the light that's on the shadow side of her face and just keep it, you know, slipping purely into darkness, just have that blue on the red. But this is a really cool look, I think, as well. And this, I just hate. This combination is so harsh. I don't like this at all, which, I mean, that's interesting too, because something like this could work out in your favor, like something that makes you feel off, you know, that sometimes that's the way that I move the camera a certain way for that reason. I want it to feel a little bit off, that I'm visually telling you that. And that's something else to keep in mind too. Some of these color combinations that do make me feel like it legitimate, I'm having a feeling in my chest from some of these color combinations. It's making me, you know, shift emotionally in different ways. It's either pleasant or it's off-putting. This for me is off-putting, and that's really interesting. I've never really thought about slamming colors against each other till this moment to actually have the audience feel something wrong. Obviously using colors to make people feel a certain way, but actually slamming two colors together that shouldn't go together to get your audience to feel a certain way. It's very interesting. You do that with music, you know? You have those two notes that don't go together to create that, you know, horror sounding chord, that off-putting chord. Maybe I could start thinking about color a little more that way. Then we'll move off to like, this just feels very pop arty to me. Like I feel like this is just a music video. I expect somebody to start singing. But the blue is making me feel like the world is a bit at odds with her. You know, that blue makes me feel, you know, a bit more tranquil, a bit more calm, but the red is the exact opposite. So it feels like this character is going through something the world around her is not. And that's pretty interesting. A lot of these color combinations do feel like things that would work really well in more of an advertising space or a music video space. And then we get to pink. I gotta tell you, I love pink. I mean, if you watch the show very much, like pink, cyan, red, orange, like those are some of my favorite colors to play around with. So I suspect if I find, yes, this is one of my favorite combinations right here. If you could get like a cyan and pink together, I'm a happy man. I don't know if this is like a Drive influence, because I mean, it definitely got heavier after Drive, but I love this color combination. Then Josh also did these like split face colors, and I think these are really interesting as well. Just a little bit of less of what it makes me feel like, but what it's actually doing to the face, those colors smashing together. Like this just feels like there's two different faces happening, as if this was a composite and not just something done with lighting to create some kind of an effect for maybe a product or maybe some kind of video. Again, a lot of this is going to be very applicable to like music videos and things like that, things where you can go crazy on a ledge stylistically. But there's a lot more shots than what we're going through here. We can't make this episode like 30 minutes long. So I think we'll export all these out and put them somewhere and put them in a link in the notes below so you guys can just watch them flat and see how these make you feel when you just watch them, even without my commentary. Check out all of those and start thinking about color and the color combination and what that can do to tell your story, be it a film, a music video, or some kind of advertisement that you're doing. They're all stories that we're telling, and every different tool that we use, be it music, color, composition, all of those things are going to go into fuse that ultimate experience you want for the audience you intend. So definitely check that out in the links below and everything else. And don't forget to check out that donate button as well if you're able. Until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.